Well, it wasn't just schools reopening their doors this morning. Open-air markets and car showrooms are also back in business. They aren't immune from the changes either, with some of London's most famous markets implementing one-way systems, floor markings encouraging people to stay 2 metres apart, and free hand sanitizer stations. But some critics still argue the easing of lockdown could be too much too soon, as our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
Jamal Mahmood's falafel wraps have been off the menu for 2 months, but today he was back in business at his stall on Portobello Road. The only missing ingredient? Customers.
I was shocked nobody turned up today. I don't know why. Yeah, so we are hoping, we are waiting, see what will happen.
Unlike Mr Mahmood, the Devlin family's fruit and veg stall has stayed open throughout lockdown. Trade has been good, but not today for some reason.
I really can't give you an answer why we are not busy today. I can't. I don't know why.
Customers also seemed cautious at the famous market in Camden, but stall holders here weren't predicting a rush.
I don't expect the market to be super busy because we base mostly on tourists and, well, there is none of them around.
Street markets are traditionally busy and vibrant. It's part of their attraction. Now they must embrace social distancing. Some medical experts worry the government is relaxing the lockdown restrictions too quickly.
The bottom line is, until we get a vaccine, people are going to keep catching this disease. And if we don't get a vaccine, then we'll stay in lockdown forever. And that isn't a tenable situation either.
Has it been busy?
Among the well-spaced stalls of Tatchbrook Market in Pimlico, the Chancellor was eager to reassure shoppers.
It's absolutely safe, and we've got a very clear plan that we've been sticking to throughout this whole process of dealing with coronavirus. And we're now at the stage of that plan where we can get our lives a little bit more back to normal.
In Portobello Road, most of the shops are still shut. But when they reopen in 2 weeks, social distancing on the pavements will become even more of a challenge. The council has a plan.
We're going to shut down the Portobello Road from 10 till 4, Monday to Saturday, so that people will be able to access the stalls from within the road.
But it's unlikely all of the regular traders will be tempted back just yet. That will only happen when the tourists return. Simon Harris, ITV News, Portobello Road.
Next tonight, the current government advice is to work from home if you can, but MPs were told that from today that was no longer an option if they wanted to vote. Any MP who was shielding or caring for others had to stay away and watch as those who could return stood in queues, snaking round the Palace of Westminster and outside. Well, in the last hour, they decided that to vote, you must be there in person, to the anger of some London MPs who say they have no choice but to stay at home. Our political correspondent, Simon Harris, reports.
Parliament might be getting a makeover, but it's not yet ready to be dragged into the 21st century. MPs hoping to be allowed to vote from home have been ordered back to Westminster. The Twickenham MP, Munira Wilson, caught the train this morning.
Today we're going to have the absurd scene of MPs queuing up for over a kilometre in order to be able to vote.
By lunchtime she was back in the chamber for a debate, but for the last 10 weeks she's been working from home.
My husband is potentially at higher risk because he takes immunosuppressant drugs for a condition that he has. So I am concerned that I'm potentially exposing him. But I don't want to leave my constituents disenfranchised.
This is how Parliament looked before lockdown, MPs sitting shoulder to shoulder. More recently, the Commons has adopted social distancing and the so-called hybrid Parliament, allowing MPs to take part online. But now the government has called time on this digital experiment.
This House plays an invaluable role in holding the government to account and debating legislation which can only properly be fulfilled where members are here in person.
But that has infuriated those unable to return.
There are lots of MPs who have underlying health conditions, people like myself who are over 70, women who are pregnant, people who have people in their household whom they are shielding, and those with childcare responsibilities. All of them will not be able to take part. So my objection is that this is a denial of democracy.
Robert Halfon was born with mild cerebral palsy and has been shielding.
In essence, they're snipping away at my democratic rights and making MPs like myself and others, hundreds of others, parliamentary eunuchs.
When the COVID-19 outbreak began, some MPs were worried about catching the virus in Parliament and taking it back to their constituencies. Now it's London, which has a lower infection rate than some other parts of the country.
We know the R value is now a lot lower than some other parts of the country, but I might be with MPs from other parts of the country from a higher risk area. I'm potentially putting others at risk by going back into my local community.
Florence Shalomi, aye. Thank you.
Like shoppers queuing for IKEA, MPs demonstrated their new voting system today. One by one, they filed into the Commons, staying 2 metres apart, but only those who were there in person. As expected, it took twice as long, and the lines snaked around the parliamentary estate.
So, Simon, not all MPs are happy about that today, but also a row about the Mayor's plans to increase the congestion charge.
Yes, this is to do with that £1.6 billion bailout he agreed with the government for Transport for London. And as part of that, he's accepted a review of the charge and its scope. In practice, what that means is the Mayor is going to increase it to £15 a day and extend the hours from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. and make it 7 days a week. Now, the Conservatives say they've discovered an appallingly short consultation period being offered to the public. According to the Tories at City Hall, it appeared on the Transport for London website yesterday and closes in 2 days' time, and they say that is unacceptable. Transport for London says this is because it's a temporary measure and therefore they don't need to have a formal consultation, which might normally take 6 weeks. Instead, they're having what they call an engagement and they don't have to do any more than that.
OK, Simon, thank you. Well, as I mentioned earlier, people gathered in their thousands today in Hyde Park. Our correspondent, Simon Harris, has been there all day following developments.
Of Hyde Park, they came from across London to take a stand. Thousands of people, hurt, angry and appalled at the death of a man in Minneapolis. The killing of George Floyd brought people out in protest, even at risk to themselves, for Britain is still in the grip of a pandemic. And in this sea of humanity, one voice spoke the loudest, the Star Wars actor John Boyega.
Black lives have always mattered. We have always been important. We have always meant something. We have always succeeded, regardless. And now is the time. I ain't waiting. What's his name? George Floyd. Say his name. George Floyd.
George Floyd's name echoed across Hyde Park. The Ely family from Pimlico were determined to be here and to be heard.
It's been a rough week. We've been really emotionally drained. It's been really hard to see our fellow black people being killed, murdered.
Are you worried at all being here?
I am worried about COVID-19 because I actually did lose my aunt to COVID-19. So I completely understand. But at the same time, I'm just as scared to go out for just being black, and that's something I can't remove.
People coming into the park were told to stand or sit in groups of no more than 5. But this was a fluid mass gathering. Social distancing was always going to be difficult. Many of the protesters took the precaution of wearing a mask. But for those with children, the decision to come was still a tough one.
I was in two minds about whether I should or shouldn't, but for me, we can't just talk to our children about racism, we have to show them.
It actually feels really, really emotional. It's been a long, 10 days of an incident which should never have happened.
What I'd love is for his mates, his black mates who are here, to get the same equal rights as what this boy's going to have.
The protesters were told there would be a march, but not the destination. They began to leave Hyde Park, a steady stream to begin with, then a scramble. Park Lane was brought to a standstill as they headed south.
I'm so happy to see people younger than me, older than me, coming out, and my generation trying to change the system.
As the march snaked along Park Lane, we caught up with the Ely family.
It's calm, but there's rage, and everyone's fighting for their lives, and yeah, I like it. I appreciate this a lot, and I'm so glad everyone has turned up for this.
As the protest reached Parliament, John Boyega again took centre stage.
Guys, thank you for coming out today. Thank you for being there to show your support for us, black people. I love you.
For some, it was simply enough just to be here. But for many of the protesters, the real point of today was not just to be seen, but to be heard. Simon Harris, ITV News.